guys for tuning in to Fantasy Football Dynasty. I'm here again, your host, Jason. We're here with our fantasy gurus. Like, I want to call you guys gurus now because all the feedback I've been getting is like, Jason, you don't know no stats. How they be having all these stats and you don't got nothing? And I say, well, that's why I got these guys, because I don't need to know nothing. Starting off with my first fantasy guru, we got Cody over here. Cody, say what's up.
What's up, guys?
All right, and then naturally we got Gerald too is here. Gerald, go ahead and say what's up.
Hey, guys.
All right, so we are here on May 17th for when we're recording this, but you may be watching this on May 18th, which is my birthday. I'm turning 30, I guess 6 now? Yes, 36. Here we go. So I'm getting up there in age. I can see all the gray.
A lot younger than what my guess was.
Oh, well, you know they say black don't crack unless they on it. So, and then, please check us out on Instagram at FF Dynasty 1, and that's the same thing for Twitter at FF Dynasty 1. Check us out on Facebook as well, Fantasy Football Dynasty. We have great content on there. Just like last week, we're going to have some people that we're not going to be able to touch and hit on. So you can go to our Instagram or Twitter and see some other candidates that we have for today's show. Shh, this is a secret. My secret, guys, the step up going to be Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz finished number 10 last year for the Eagles, and I know you say, Jason, how does a guy who finished number 10 going to step it up more? Well, it is higher numbers than 10. In NFL news that is fantasy relevant, Cody, you have some news for us?
May 19th, apparently, supposedly, the NFL facilities and the clubs are supposed to be able to open back up as long as they comply with state and local laws. So I see Gerald with his fingers crossed. Yeah, man.
We're hoping. We want sports back.
We want sports back. Hell, I'll take baseball. I'm just playing.
That's great news, especially because then it will make talking all this fantasy football we've been talking worth something, because if it was no season, we'll have all these recordings where we just will be like, yeah, if the season would have played. So today's show is going to be about the opposite of last week's show. So if you haven't watched last week's show, you need to go and check that out. Again, check it out on Facebook at Fantasy Football Dynasty or on YouTube under Straight from the Hip as well. So check out last week's show. But this week we're going to talk about players who are taking a step down or a step back this year. So we looked at the qualifications for this. We tried to pick players that we didn't think were, one, extremely obvious, but two, players that are changing maybe a system, or maybe they were injured last year, or maybe coming off an injury, or some kind of circumstances that we think that they won't have the same production that they had last year. Starting off with quarterbacks, let's jump right on to Cody. Cody, who do you have for your quarterback that you have possibly taken a step back?
Well, since y'all wanted me to go obvious with Rashad Perriman taking a step forward last week, I figured I'd throw Jameis Winston in right here. My boy Jameis Winston, he's taking going from the league leader in passing yards to back up to Drew Brees. Have you guys seen the list of players that are getting paid higher than Jameis Winston this year?
No.
It's nuts, dude. I don't remember off the top of my head, but you need to go check it out. I'll try to get it up on the Instagram page this week.
See, I feel like Jameis is a cheat. I feel like Taysom Hill is probably the player that's going to take a bigger step back now.
Oh, man. But no, in all seriousness, Jameis's teammate is the guy I have taken a step down, Drew Brees. Every year since 2016, Drew Brees has dropped in both yardage from 5,208 to 4,334, 3,992, 2,979. Now, I will say last year, obviously, an injury had a little bit to do with that. But that's to be expected from a 41-year-old man. But I don't think that Brees' body is going to be able to hold up quite as much as it used to be able to. And realistically, his past attempts have gone down each year too. 673, 386, 364, 281. I just see Brees on a steady decline, and I don't know if he's going to be able to come back out of it too much.
No, I'm right there with you. I think I'm the other person on the podcast that I had Drew Brees as a candidate for regression. And I'm concerned when you have to bring in Taysom Hill to throw the deep ball, especially now you got Emmanuel Sanders this year, Michael Thomas, which I think he's a great deep ball receiver, but is not getting enough credit because they're doing more intermediate stuff. Then you even have Alvin Kamara there. So I expect that, you want to do a play action rollout and utilize Emmanuel Sanders in that role. Even I know, as Gerald will probably attest to, that role he filled very well in Pittsburgh as kind of the stretch the field guy. I don't think Drew Brees has the arm anymore for it.
I think even for the past two off seasons, we've been waiting till well into the off season to see if Brees is going to announce his retirement. And it's actually funny you bring up Taysom Hill, who's got that running ability. That's actually another reason I see Brees taking another step back, is because of that running ability. He's only topped 100 yards one time in his career. I believe that was back when he was with the then San Diego Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can necessarily argue that. I don't know that I have Drew Brees taking a step back myself, but I like the reasoning. I mean, I looked at another older QB who has a limited ceiling as far as rushing ability, and I picked Aaron Rodgers. He finished QB 6 in 2018, QB 9 last year, and this year I see him falling out of the top 12 potentially. He was QB 1 in 2016, but since that year, he hasn't finished in the top 16 amongst all quarterbacks in yards per attempt. And since 2014, he hasn't thrown for more than 26 touchdowns. So at least Drew Brees did get himself another weapon in Emmanuel Sanders, and they didn't really bolster Aaron Rodgers' receiving core. So I see Aaron Rodgers kind of for the same reasoning that y'all see Drew Brees, just an older quarterback with limited upside with the legs, but I see him as my quarterback to take a step back.
Also, you don't think that all the adversity and them drafting Jordan Love won't inspire Aaron Rodgers to find the fountain of youth and go back to old form and be the best quarterback in the league? We don't see that happening?
I mean, I definitely don't want to bet against Aaron Rodgers. I don't want him coming back at me, spelling out RELAX.
Absolutely. No, I'm right there with you. I actually last year dogged the owner that had Aaron Rodgers the week before he played the Raiders. I was talking mad grease, like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is washed and you drafted him and blah, 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 blah. And then he plays the Raiders.
Yeah, watch him be a top 5 QB now.
Right. I'm pretty sure Cody loved that week too.
Man, I was thrilled.
We're going to jump right into running backs. We're going to have a running back that all three of us thought is going to take a step back this year. I'm going to let Gerald talk about that running back, so go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, the one that we all agreed on was Mark Ingram for the Baltimore Ravens. He was running back 11 last year, and I personally see him outside the top 20 this coming year. He's 30 years old now, and he handled 202 carries out of the 596 carries for the Ravens, which was about 34%, and he only got about 7% of the targets. So he was definitely carried by efficient running. He averaged 5 yards per carry and the double-digit touchdowns. So we definitely see Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and the newly drafted J.K. Dobbins cutting into that.
Well, so if we all think that Mark Ingram is going to take a step back, I would assume that if he becomes a little less efficient, someone else in that backfield is going to start taking those carries and probably could be fantasy viable. So I'm going to start with Cody out of, I guess, it's Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Justice Hill. Who do you think is going to pick up that slack that Ingram's going to leave?
I'll put it this way, man. I don't think you draft a running back in the second round to let him just sit there, unless his name's Rashad Penny. J.K. Dobbins, 1,486 yards and 12 touchdown average in his time in college. I think that J.K. Dobbins is really going to pick up the slack. We know it's not going to be Justice Hill.
All right. Well, for you, Gerald, who do you think is going to pick up the slack?
Yeah, I actually agree with Cody. In the long term, I think it's J.K. Dobbins, but as a rookie, it's going to be hard for him to get back into that system. So immediately, I think it's going to be Gus Edwards that actually takes a step up this year. He actually was a more efficient runner than Mark Ingram. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry, so he gets a little more action out of the backfield this year. I think he takes a step up.
Actually, people forget, like, Gus the Bus was a thing for like a half a year, about 2 years ago.
He won some people some leagues. I remember that.
Exactly. People forget that. See, I have to go with what I've already tied myself to. I was one of those guys that drafted Justice Hill in my Dynasty League a year ago. So I'm going to say that Justice Hill is going to pick up the slack, especially when Dobbins breaks his leg and then Gus Edwards gets a concussion and Mark Ingram's too old. Justice Hill, baby. That's going to be your new fantasy MVP right here, guys. I'm calling it right here for you. You got Rashad Perriman. I got Justice Hill. So I'm going to let Cody go ahead and talk about the running back that me and him both agree will possibly take a step back this year.
It's funny. I just made a joke about his backup. Chris Carson, 1,230 yards and 7 touchdowns as an RB12 in 2019. and then 1,151 and 9 as the RB15 in 2018. I mean, I looked at those numbers and I thought, why is he not even a little bit higher? And then I looked at his receptions. He's averaging 21 receptions over per year over his 3-year career so far. And realistically, I don't know that necessarily increases this coming year. I think Carson is really going to take a step back. I do think Rashad Penny kind of continues to grow into that role.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the tagline Chris Carson for me, and I love Chris Carson. And people that are going to listen to this that know me, they know how high I've always been on Chris Carson from 2 years ago, from last year. But he always seems to get injured when you need him the most. And I think he's coming off injury this year. So I think it's going to be slow at the beginning because most people have to get back into it. You know, we're running backs. It usually takes a year for them to get back to their former form. So I just do not feel comfortable or confident that Chris Carson's going to take a lot. Now, I know Rashard Penny got injured as well last year, so we talk about that time split. But I know one thing that I think Gerald mentioned maybe 1 or 2 shows ago, we know Seattle's going to run the ball. It's just the purpose of who's going to have it in their arms and their hands when they decide to run it. I know, Gerald, do you have any thoughts on Chris Carson?
Yeah, I mean, I get where y'all's heads are at, and I definitely see them trying to incorporate Rashad Penny into that offense. But I think I'm actually the other way. I think he not necessarily taking a big step up, but I don't know that he drops too much because, yeah, he's not the biggest – he hasn't been the biggest threat out of the backfield, but his targets and receptions have increased every year in his 3-year career. So,
Gerald, where do you have – do you still have him in your top 20 finishing this year?
Yeah, I think he's still an RB2. I think he finished 12th last year, so maybe a couple steps back to like 14, 15, but I think he's still an RB2.
Cody, and I'm presuming you have him out of your top 20, correct?
Borderline, 21, 22, somewhere right in there.
A nice old board bet here, Gerald versus the world. That Chris Carson finishes.
I'll take him in the top 20.
For me and Cody, feel like he's going to finish out of the top 20. Gerald, you feel like Chris Carson will finish top 20 or higher. Let's go ahead and make that board bet. I'm going to write that down. Speaking of running backs, a running back that I want to talk about that I think is going to take a step back here, and it may be a little bit of division envy or hate. So I think Kenyan Drake is going to take a step back, and I think the biggest reason I feel this way is that we've seen this story before with Kenyan Drake. We've seen him have these great games when he was in Miami, and he looked great, and we're like, oh, yeah, they're going to give him the role, and they never gave him the lead back role. Every coach can't be wrong about him. And Cliff Kingsbury ends up being right about him. So when I started diving into his games, I wanted to really focus on the games when he was with a Cardinal. Now, when he was with the Cardinal, he got there in Week 9 versus the 49ers. The 49ers, he had 24 points against the 49ers, 38 against Cleveland Week 15, and then 30 against the Seahawks in Week 16. But I took all his points since Week 9, and that equaled up to 131.4 fantasy points. 93.2 of those fantasy points came in those 3 games. So 70% of his point total was those 3 games. That is typical Kenyan Drake. He's going to have a bunch of stinkeroos, and you're going to be like, what? And the problem I'm having, why I think is a step back, is because people are drafting this guy as an RB1. So I just do not – I just can't get with Kenyan Drake. And I know it's probably some hate. Unlike Cody, I can admit my hate of my rivals.
I mean, I definitely still – I don't know if I trust him fully because, like you said, I mean, he didn't even win the starting back job in Miami. So it's hard, I mean, because he did really special things after he got to the Cardinals. I think from when he started with the Cardinals, I think he scored the 4th most points amongst running backs. But, you know, again, how do you spread that over a full season now that it's hard to gauge? I don't know that he's going to be able to keep up that usage, but I don't know how far he falls there.
Cody, what are your thoughts?
I'm with that, honestly. I mean, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, you still got Fitz there. You've got Kingsbury, who likes to air the ball out more than anything. I mean, I think I can definitely see your reasoning that a lot of weapons in that offense trying to feed everybody is going to be really difficult unless they're going to get to the 70, 75 plays that they want to get to.
100%. Well, let's jump right into receivers. This is another guy all 3 of us felt the same about. I would say I personally dislike this guy because the fans of this guy claim he's like a top 10 receiver of all time, and
Hall
all
of
they want to
Famer.
tout,
I'm just playing. No.
all they want to tout is like, look what he does in the playoffs. And actually, Cody, our boy Jimmy, loves to tout this player. I'm gonna let you, Cody, tell everybody who this player is and why you think he's going to take a step back.
Yeah, Jimmy's also a Cowboys fan, so he likes to talk a little bit.
Touche.
Julian Edelman. I think it's going to be more situational than anything. He doesn't have arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play the game throwing him the ball anymore. I think realistically that is one of the biggest arguments that I have. I think it's less of a knock against Edelman because I think the guy's got talent for sure, and more of a knock on his quarterback situation. Realistically, they're, again, not going to be throwing to much of anybody else unless N'Keal Harry really takes that step that we thought he was going to have in his rookie year. I mean, I just don't like the situation. I'm probably not going to be anywhere near Edelman this year.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something off the cuff that we didn't discuss. Even on the worst teams or teams that we think are just offensively non-starters, do you see any receiver in that offense possibly being fantasy relevant as maybe a flex receiver 3, 2? Any thoughts of anybody that you could think of? Let's go with you, Gerald. Anybody you could think off the top of your head?
I mean, Julian Edelman would be it, and I still have him finishing wide receiver 3, maybe a flex. So I think he's the highest, especially like Cody said. I mean, who's throwing him the ball?
Cody, any thoughts?
I mean, Edelman would be the highest. I mean, I might take a very, very, very late dart throw in like a dynasty or keeper league on N'Keal Harry. If you want to consider running backs as well, maybe James White.
Let's move on to another guy that me and Gerald both agreed with, which would be John Brown. So, Gerald, go and tell me a little bit why you think John Brown's going to take the step back.
Yeah, again, kind of like Edelman, not necessarily questioning the talent and staying healthy, but the Buffalo Bills just traded for Stephon Diggs, and Stephon Diggs should be the number 1 pass catcher in that offense. Brown had 26% of the Bills' targets last year. John Brown posted career highs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards and finished wide receiver 20. So he's definitely taking a step back with Diggs in town.
I do. Again, I think just besides the Stephon Diggs part, I just think it is going to be a slight regression there because we know they're not going to throw the ball a lot. Like, we know this. I want to go ahead and go to a receiver that I don't think is going to take a step back, but Cody and Gerald think they're going to take a step back. So it is Keenan Allen. So I'm going to let Cody start because obviously he hates the Chargers.
Yeah, Then Cody had Eckler on his list too, taking a step back.
Yeah, on his running backs. Yes, he did.
Chargers.
I did.
Chargers taking a step back all around.
Taylor's not really what I would consider the definition really of a franchise quarterback. Realistically, Keenan Allen had his target share decrease from 29.2% in 2018 to 26% in 2019. Williams is starting to come into his own on the ground a little bit more with the kid they just drafted, as well as Justin Jackson. I think that realistically, the offense is not going to be as good as I'm used to it being, and I just see Keenan Allen taking a pretty big step back this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the quarterback situation. He's losing Phillip Rivers, who's been throwing the ball his entire career pretty much. He was wide receiver 6 last year. I see him finishing essentially outside the top 15 without Phillip Rivers. Again, no question of the talent there. But I will say Keenan Allen hasn't scored more than 6 touchdowns since 2013, his rookie year. So, I mean, there seems to have been a ceiling there as well.
That's because he likes to catch the ball and lay down immediately.
I just thought that's why you guys lose so many games. You don't score no touchdowns. So I don't know. I feel like we would think our resident Chargers lover / hater would have more insight for us. But I guess he's not on the payroll anymore because he put Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler on his step back list. So, Cody, go ahead and tell us about a receiver that neither one of us had that you had.
I feel like this one was a little bit of low-hanging fruit, to be completely honest, but Jarvis Landry finished, I think it was wide receiver 12 last year. I really don't think with Odell Beckham being in that offense that he's really going to be able to sustain that. Realistically, I think that Odell Beckham is just going to take enough of a step up to push Landry outside of the wide receiver 2 range, probably even mid wide receiver 3 to flex.
Okay. I like that a lot. I like that. I could dig that. Gerald, let's talk about tight ends. You had a tight end that you think was going to take a step back. Who is it? Let us know why.
Yeah, I had 2 tight ends, but I think I wanted to highlight Dallas Goddert. Surprisingly to me, top 10. He was tight end 10 last year. I think he finishes outside the top 15 this next year. Might be obvious, but they just drafted Jalen Reagor. And then if you assume Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson are healthy, and even newly acquired Marquise Goodwin.
Hold on, stop here for a second. You're assuming that Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson will be, you know what? Hope
it's quite the assumption.
Yeah, hope springs eternal, so I'm going to let you have that. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, it's definitely quite the assumption. I just think he's going to have trouble being targeted as a tight end 1 for those reasons. And, I mean, he's the number 2 tight end on his own team, so.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that there. Cody, what are your thoughts on that, on Dallas taking a step back?
Realistically, I completely agree. I feel like if he had gone to a new team, maybe, but just being buried behind Ertz is a top 3 tight end easily. And as far as fantasy goes, and realistically, thinking off the top of my head, real football, Ertz is just too good for them to really look Goddard's way or Godder's way too much more. I don't think he's going to be able to sustain what he did last year. I think it was over 600 yards and 5 touchdowns off 58 receptions. I completely agree. He's going to take a step back.
Also, too, let's keep in mind that he flourished when Zach Ertz was pretty much in and out of the lineup. Alshon Jeffries was out of the lineup. Deshaun Jackson was out of the lineup. Nelson Aguilar was out of the lineup. Jadea Whiteside was god-awful. They picked up some guys off the street that said, hey, you know what? I see you eating that hot dog. Can you catch a football? All right, we can use you this week. He flourished when all of that was going on. So, again, hope springing eternal. Alshon's there. Deshaun Jackson's there. Marquise Goodwin is there. Jalen Reagor is there. Zach Ertz. And that's not even including that Miles Sanders catch out of the backfield as well. So
they're posting jobs on a Monster. So
I wish I'd caught the ad.
I think that wraps up our show for players that are going to step back. And I hate to say this, when we tag some of these players, they're probably going to give us a lot of hate mail, or at least call us a bunch of hacks, which I know I am. And my fantasy gurus over here, I won't take any of that back talk to them. So, as always, I like to tell you guys to, again, like, follow, and share us on Instagram, on Twitter at FF Dynasty 1. Also, check us out on Facebook. Hopefully, you're watching us now on Facebook, Fantasy Football Dynasty on Facebook there. You can also check us out on Straight From the Hips YouTube channel. We have our shows up there. And I keep forgetting to shout this out, and Cody reminded me, we are on your digital service providers. So that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM. We're on there. So if you can't tune into the regular physical show, you can listen to us when you're driving, which I don't know where you're going in this situation, but if you are deciding to go out, you listen to us there. If you're just sitting around the house and cleaning and you want to put on something, listen to some fantasy football advice, please put us on there. So we are on the digital platforms. We got to remember to shout those out for you guys to check us out there. Also, the last thing is, please check out our Instagram and Twitter, because we will be putting some of the players that we did not get to speak about on this show that we all individually had that neither one of us agreed with. Usually I should do this at the beginning and call it the church announcements.
No, just looking forward to continuing along with these. It's been a ton of fun so far. Can't wait to keep talking.
All right, Gerald?
Yeah, and like you said, Jason, follow us on Instagram where we have individual videos up talking about other players that we didn't get to on this video. So
absolutely.
Austin Eckler will be on there. I'll give some details on the way.
I was going to talk about Brashard Perryman, but you can't fall from the bottom. The dude started 10 games in his career. I don't know how he can take a step back.
Thank you, my fantasy gurus and hosts. Thank you guys for making me look better by having no numbers and stats every week. And we will come break to you guys next week. Thank you guys for listening and viewing. Ooh. Baby, it's just you and I.